What's up? Welcome to John Box Watercolor. Today, we're going to be doing another challenge video where we create a painting with only two colors. When I first started out painting, I fell into this trap. I kept wondering, for my favorite artists, what colors were in their palette. As time went on, I started to realize that tone is more important than color. For example, take any painting or any photo on your phone and turn on the black and white filter. It still is a great painting, even though there's no color. Tone is what we use to depict what we're seeing in front of us. Color, on the other hand, is what we use to express ourselves. So today, I'm gonna be walking you through, we're gonna be focusing on tone, and hopefully, you'll be a better painter. Let's get started. So we've got our sketch here. I'll put my reference photo over on the right-hand side so you can take a look here. This is Paris, France. It's kind of a vintage photograph. The sketch has been kept pretty true to form, but as always, part of being an artist, part of creating something of your own is kind of moving things around to fit your taste. So we've got a couple of vehicles up front, some folks, pedestrians walking across the street. For the colors we're going to be using today, I've got two pigments here. I've got Cobalt Blue and Yellow Ochre. And if you don't have these and you want to follow along, that's no big deal. All you need is just a cool color and a warm color. That's all that we're working with here. Something we've got to be really careful about is monitoring how watery our washes are, because normally I've got a neutral tint that I can use to really darken and get that impact I'm looking for. But since we don't have that, if I get too dark with my first wash, I'm not going to be able to get that tonal contrast that we're looking for. So let's go ahead and get started here. I'm going to spray a little water on the paper. And again, we're going to try to keep things very loose. This is just for fun. If you want to do a full painting like this or introduce this sort of style into your works, you can. But today, we're learning about how to focus on tone and try to ignore color a little bit more. Just think warm and cool, light and dark. So for our sky here, I'm just gonna brush some water around to get us started. And then I'm gonna come in here and we're gonna get a lot of kind of greenish mixtures, right? We've got kind of this yellow and a blue pigment. So we've got to be careful, but there's nothing wrong with that. But I wanna just kind of spread it out a little bit. I'm going to leave some lighter areas to kind of represent clouds. We'll get a little bit of a cooler touch in there. Again, just getting some variation in tone to help add some depth there. All right, now we'll leave that there. We're going to work our way down the page. And again, this is our first wash. I just want to keep things nice and light, not worry about too much. Now, the only thing I am going to kind of leave behind here is I'm going to leave these windshields completely white, just so that we get that really strong, oops, well, I went through that one, but that's okay. Just get that really strong contrast. Again, it's all about tone. And the lightest tone that we can get when we're painting, whether we're doing this drill or doing a full piece, is going to be the white of the paper. I'm going to take a towel here, and I'm just going to soften up the edges here. Normally I've got a paper towel nearby, but I just forgot to grab that. So this is just an old towel I have laying over here. All right, that looks pretty good. Now as we move down towards the street, I'm gonna warm it up, I think, a little bit. Again, just trying to focus on keeping this first wash very light, right? We can always go darker, no problem there. But once your wash dries, you can't go any lighter. And as always, I'm going to get darker as I move towards the bottom of our paper here. I'm really trying to pull some pigment here. Let's see if that's a little bit darker. Yeah, it's a little bit. Still need it to be a bit darker than that. And when I say darker, I don't necessarily mean towards the spectrum of, I guess if we're talking white to black, I really just mean let's thicken up the paint. It's okay if it's bluer or yellower or whatever. I just need it to be stronger in pigment, stronger in tone. All right, we're getting darker here. And by making the bottom of our paper darker, it kind of creates this illusion that the bottom is closer than what we have in the rear. Now, while this is still wet, I'm going to throw a couple of just variations back here, get some soft edges for things that could be in the distance. Maybe throw some color in there. All right, there we go. Last thing I'm going to do before we let this dry, I'm going to take my, let's use just the back of a paintbrush here, and I'm going to just kind of scratch, let's see, just some kind of perspective lines there. Very, very light, not much of an impact, but that's okay. It's going to help me as I work through this painting, but also, especially later on, I've got some shadows I'm going to work in down here, and I want to just have some kind of lighter lines moving down through the paper. Okay, so see, very easy to start off. Anybody can do that. Let's let this dry. We'll come back and we'll keep working. So we're going to go ahead and start on our second wash now. I've added some fresh paint down here just so that I can have some stronger pigments as we work through this. Again, how we're going to get that contrast is through the variation of water and pigment in our washes. All right, I'm going to go ahead and start with this building here. And all I'm thinking about, again, we have two colors here. We've got a cool color and a warm color. Is I'm just thinking of ratios, light and dark, warm and cool. So I'm going to ask myself, is this building here, is it darker or lighter than the sky behind it? From our reference photo, I can tell you that it's darker. Then I look at the two main variations in this building. We've got the roofs and the bodies. And so I say, which one's cooler, which one's warmer? The bodies are warmer, the roofs are cooler. That's it. It's just two simple thoughts, and we're going to use that to do basically this entire painting here. So I'm going to mix up something fairly thick here. And I want to make sure, I'm going to start on the roof, so I'm going to make sure it's on the cooler side. Let's get a little bit more water in there. And let's just start with something like that. You know what? I'm going to throw just a little bit of water on the paper just to help things kind of spread around. And we're just going to keep working our way through. Again, I want to move my brush a little bit quickly just to kind of get some little abstractions and variations. I'm just pulling and using this warmer color for some of the little antennas and things that come off, just for pure variation there. All right, now let's warm it up. We're going to move into the body here. I'm going to just throw some paint there. I may leave just that little white line there. Kind of creates its own natural highlight. And again, I want to move that brush quickly through there. And if I leave a few white areas, that's no big deal, right? Stop that. Cool it down again as we move towards another roof. And again, always just thinking warm and cool, light and dark. And when you break it down like that, painting gets a lot easier. Now I'm moving that brush kind of quickly along that line there. You notice again, I'm getting a few breaks. It just leads to a more interesting painting. They could be highlights. It tends to leave a better impression, in my opinion. Warming it back up for the body here. And as we get down in here, this is where you can really kind of let yourself go loose a little bit. I want to have these nice sharp lines in the sky so that we really get that shape. But down in here, we're going to let things kind of melt together a little bit. I'm going to grab this larger brush just so I can cover a bit more area. You want to use the largest brush you can, almost always. It just helps you not get stuck painting all these little things, all right? Get it just a little bit warmer. And we're just going to work through here. Again, leaving some space here and there. I'm going to go off in the distance. Okay, this has got to be a little bit lighter. But we've got this roof back here. And you see how that and that, they're too close in their strength. I need to lighten it up a little bit. Remember, that's off in the distance, so it needs to have a lighter impact. All right. I'm a little bit interested to see how this turns out. This is a bit strange because of just the colors that we've got here. It's definitely going to have some green to it. I don't think I'm going to start doing all my paintings like this, but it is a fun little exercise. All right, and there's also this tower here on this one. And we're just going to let it kind of bleed down there into the building. I'll add a little bit something stronger for the kind of antenna top of this tower here. Just something like that. We're adding a few lines here and there. All right, let's pick this up. I want to make sure that I've got some darker paint down here around our cars, right? Because we've left those windshields, or tried to leave those windshields, lighter. So I want to have my darkest darks next to my lightest lights. That's how you get that contrast. That's how you get shapes to stick out. So I've got this roof here, or excuse me, that windshield. And as I work my way through, I'm going to grab just some pure paint there and just kind of toss it in. I'm going to let this bleed. Something like that. Just cut off that car there. All right. I need to soften things up a little bit over on this right side. So I'm just going to grab some pure water and kind of let that just bleed off into the atmosphere there. There's a tree that I want to build over there. All right, this is looking pretty good so far. I think what I'm going to do now, we're going to go ahead and work on these cars a bit. And then we may let this dry and add our darker darks a bit later. I'm going to keep this vehicle here. I want to use a lot of yellow and try to give the impression of a taxi, but I've got to make sure to continue to mix some of that cobalt in there just to darken things up. All right, so I'll use something very yellow here, and this is almost pure pigment. And then I'll darken it as I work my way down. Maybe there's some mirrors there. And get it a bit bluer for the bottom to kind of simulate darkness. And I'm going to have the sun in this coming from left to right. So I'm going to go ahead and just cast a bit of a shadow off of that vehicle there. I'll just be kind of the hood of the car or the grille. And then let's take my brush here and maybe scrape out some headlights there. Let's work on our other vehicles for the moment. And again, really the focus here is get that paint dark. I've got to make it stand out from the buildings behind, right? That's how we get our shapes to pop out. We've got to have that weight to them. Grab some more yellow for this vehicle back here. I messed that one up a little bit, but that's okay. I'll do the same thing. I'm going to connect that and then just pull that line over, make a little bit of a shadow. We'll do the same thing back there. I'm going to dip into this dark paint here and just kind of add some dark blobs here and there. It could be things off in the background, all sorts of stuff. All right, I'm going to take the back of this brush here. We'll scratch some vertical lines. These could be posts. I need my palette knife. I moved it the other day and I don't see it in my easel, and it's really, really useful to have that. So I may have to pause here and see if I can't find that, but I'm just going to scratch out some highlights back here. It could be walls, gates. And remember, the thing we're working on here is we're staying loose. We're just exploring how the lightness and darkness of our tones can create all these different shapes. All right. Maybe I'll scratch something there for some headlights. It's no big deal. All right. I'm going to let this dry. I'm going to go see if I can't find my palette knife, and we're going to continue this painting. We're going to add our figures, our dark darks, and then I've got a tree I want to add and maybe some shadow here. I haven't quite figured out how I want to do that. Oh, one thing before, I do want to just maybe add a little bit of some dark pigment. Now that our roof has dried a little bit, if I add it now, it'll hold its shape decently well, but it will still soften it up. And that softness is how you create distance. Okay. I'm going to leave that alone for now. I'll come back and mess with it. Let's let this dry, and we will work on our third wash. All right, we're back, and we're going to be adding our figures in here, starting to add some details on the building, and just getting really, really dark with the paint that we're going to be using. I'm going to add just a little bit more fresh paint here. It'll just make our lives a little bit easier, since as we move through the layers, we're going to start using, that's pretty good. We're going to start using more and more pigment. So just putting a little bit in your palette, it's just going to make things a little bit easier. So I'm going to kind of warm up a little bit here, and I'm going to just do a little dry brushing, I think. I just want to throw some windows on our building there, and that will really start to pull things forward for us. Okay. Let's grab a little water. And let's maybe add something up there. I don't really like that shape very much. Let's take our palette knife, another good use for it. Perfect. And this is always my favorite stage of painting, because things really just start to come together. All right, that looks pretty good. I'm going to throw in some vertical lines there. Could be street, lamp posts, little trees and things, all sorts of stuff. All right, now let's get into the fun part here. Let's start adding some figures in here. And something you'll always hear me talk about is when you're drawing your figures, don't try to draw arms and legs. Figures are very simple. It is essentially I want to call it a blob, but it's a blob where the top is so wide and it gets wider at the bottom. It has an orb on top that you can use a warm color for, so we'll just use this. It's what we have. Right, like that. And then it's got two sticks coming out of it for legs, and that is really it. And sometimes I won't even put both in there. For these, for this first figure, I will, just so we're very clear in terms of what it is, but your brain is going to fill in all those other things. So don't get caught up. Let yourself be expressive. That is the biggest key in advancing your skills as a painter, especially if you want to be an impressionist. And really, even if you're doing realistic paintings, for things that are off in the distance, you don't have to paint every tree, every stop sign. You've got to let the eye fill things in. The eye is always going to be a better painter than you are, and you've got to use that to your advantage. So we're just adding a few things out there. We've got a main figure here on the right. And again, you'll notice, since we've only got these two colors to work with, there's no need to worry about, varying all these different things like, oh, I need to have a white shirt and then a blue shirt figure, red dress. Oops. Again, color is what we use to express ourselves. Tone is how we get our impressions. And so right now for this drill, again, we're just focusing on that impression. I'm going to mix something up here. I need to add a few shadows in. We started to add some figures, so I just want to pull a few shadows across our scape here. Let's separate those a little bit. All right, we'll do the same thing there. And as you'll see, this is going to start to come together. Now, let's take this and add just a little bit more paint. Again, kind of just create some objects and things off in the distance. I'm going to use this and pull that, and I can kind of create the impression of like a shirt or something. Maybe it starts to look like this individual's got a jacket on. And you know what? Maybe I'll just grab a little blue for some hair there. I don't always do that, but since they're kind of up close, I don't mind as much. Let's take and add a bit more emphasis on the grills there. I think that looks good. Maybe kind of smear that down if I can. Perfect. Now I've got a large kind of tree shape here. And I'm squinting my eyes, just trying to get it kind of a feel for how I want it to be. I want to kind of have it be a taller and kind of get more, essentially, I don't want to have it creep out too much right here because I think it'll kind of crowd this area. I want to kind of have it a little bit higher. So I've got a video out on foliage and how you create trees. You know, if you're struggling with that, I recommend taking a look. But really the easiest way is to put the brush on its side. And it also helps to have paper that has a bit of a rougher texture to it. But we're going to slowly just build up this tree form here. And even if you don't have rough paper, this is still a really good way to build in foliage. I try to tell people, you know, when you're getting into watercolor, it can be expensive. And you're kind of faced with three areas where you can spend your money, right? You've got your paints, you've got your brushes, and then you've got your paper. And paper's always the one that people pick last as the thing that they want to spend money on. But I am here to tell you, if I had to choose, I would put paint first, and then I'd put paper second, brushes last. I mean, some of the brushes I have, this is just a regular old wooden, I don't know, it's not a watercolor brush. You can get away with a lot of stuff, but having good paint, strong pigments, and by the way, I'm also just gonna take this smaller brush to kind of add some limbs here. Having good paints and strong pigments is very important, but if you don't have good paper to put them on, they're never going to reach their full potential. Paper was I think the most influential. Once I was into painting and I started spending a bit more money, it had a huge influence on my work when I upgraded to some paper that was just a little bit better. I mean, it's expensive. I use Arch paper, but I think it is worth every penny. Once you start, like I won't use any other paper. And that's kind of a very good brief. Again, we're just going for an impression here. Maybe I'll scratch some highlights in there. But that's about all our tree is going to be. And then I'm going to throw some shadow here. I want to be really careful with this, really careful. We're going to build the shadow up similarly to how we built the foliage. The main key with shadows, though, is if I've got a dark figure and then a shadow, I just want to ensure that the shadow is a different tone. Or excuse me, same tone, different temperature. So I'm going to go really blue with this. I got to be careful because my other shadows aren't this blue, so I don't want it to look too unnatural. But I've got to have some difference there that will say, hey, that's a shadow. Tap that there. I got to be careful. just a little bit something in there, and I'll kind of, you want to leave breaks in that foliage. And I'll kind of connect it back here, I think, just to really show that. I don't always like drawing trunks of trees, but I needed to kind of close that gap a little bit there. Something like that, I think. And just to kind of equalize things, I'm going to come in here and make our shadows a bit more blue so that everything is a bit more, I don't know, it flows a bit better. I gotta be careful. I really dislike going over shadows, but I think there it was a little bit necessary. All right, this is looking pretty good. I'm actually a little bit surprised. I kind of expected this not to turn out so great, but I am liking it. I'm gonna add a little yellow on top, kind of give it that taxi vibe. Some mirrors there. Maybe smear some paint here. Kind of, I don't know, create a little something. Maybe I'll scratch a tie out here. But again, I'm not doing that with paint. It's just light, dark, warm and cool. All right, I'm glancing here. I'm not seeing too much I want to do. Another big mistake I see beginners doing is overworking their paintings. I don't remember who the artist was that said this, but it always stuck with me. If you're looking at your painting and it takes you more than 5-10 seconds to see something to do, you're done. Move on to the next step. I did just want to create this kind of a little lamppost here. And I think last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to pull a shadow out for it. Something like that. I don't really like that, but that's okay. All right, we're going to let this dry, and we're going to add our final details. Take a look, and we will be done. All right, we are ready to finish this up. It's about done, but I just wanted to take a little peek here, let the colors dry, and see if anything needs a touch-up. Overall, I'm actually pretty pleased with the way this turned out. I was not expecting much. I'm going to put behind this person here, I want to put a sign or something, I think. Just something interesting there. I don't want to add too much. Maybe I'll add just a borderline here for the edge of the street. Just darkening up that kind of lead in there. I'll do the same here. But other than that, I think we're about done. I am going to do one thing. I'm cheating a little bit on the two colors, but I'm going to add some highlights with the my white titanium gouache. If you're a watercolorist and you haven't started experimenting with gouaches, I highly recommend it. You're going to see in about 2 seconds how much of an impact these make, because the issue we run into is when we're being expressive, when we're being loose, we can plan things out, but there are certain things that we need to bring back, need to separate later on. For example, these two figures, very dark, building behind them also very dark, and I want to try to separate them a little bit. And I mentioned that we had a sun on the left, and so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put just a little touch of some light on the left side of these figures. And what it does is it helps push that building back, helps bring them forward. And it's a nice way to emphasize what's important in your painting here. Now you don't want to overdo it, but I am, again, just adding some highlights on the left side of some pieces and things. But I'll even throw it on. It's great on headlights to help them stand out a bit more. And again, always being loose with it. That's the key to everything we're doing here. And maybe I'll throw kind of one vertical line there. We have this kind of street light post here. I'll kind of give it a little bit of something. Again, trying my best not to overdo it. I often, especially when I first started using it, that was my biggest thing I had to reel in, was to quit overdoing it. I had one highlight there on that roof. And I think that's it. I think we're done here. I'm gonna sign it, take the tape off, we can all take a look, and let's talk about it. Again, you know, I'm pleased with how this turned out. I was really expecting the whole thing just to turn green, and it definitely has some green to it, but I have definitely done worse paintings before. Let's throw a little signature down there. I need to get a new small brush. Unfortunately, I'm not very good at prolonging the life of my tools, and so I tend to be a little bit rough with them, and this one is starting to, I don't know if you can see that, but it's starting to curl up a little bit, but that's okay. All right, let's take the tape off. Always a fun part of the process, but yeah, I think it looks nice. Things that I would have done differently. I would have liked, I think this car got a little bit wonky here. Both cars to me are just, they're okay. I think it would have been nice to have a car, both of these are kind of going to the left. I think it would have been nice to have one in the distance, maybe going to the right, so that I could use the left side of that car and leave it open for the sun to hit it and get some nice reflection. But overall, I'm just being nitpicky here, to be honest. I think it looks good. I think we kept things loose. We've got our major components in the thirds of the painting, and this is just kind of your standard artistic principles. You know, the rule of thirds. We've had a third, 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 third. If we look at the intersections here, I've kind of got this car on this third, this car on this third. Our tower's kind of running up a third. So I think it's been laid out nicely. You know, again, I'm really surprised that this is only 2 colors. I think it turned out, good. So if you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. Helps get this content out to more people, and consider subscribing. It's been a little bit since I released a video, but trying to get back on a schedule and get more of these things out there. So thanks again for tuning by, and keep on painting.